Bonjour, bonjour. Good morning, everyone. A great pleasure to welcome you all for day 2 of the AFRAN Forum here at Swinburne University of Technology. I'm assuming that a few people here today were not with us yesterday, so I will start the proceeding by acknowledging that we're meeting on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. We're very proud to say that our campus here at Hawthorne, but also our 2 campuses at Croydon and Mount Turner, stand proudly on the land of the Wurundjeri people, where we continue to have discussion and share knowledge. I acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. It is a particular pleasure today to start what will promise to be another productive and enlightening day, centered around how we can work together to shape a sustainable future for our world through strengthening the research and innovation bonds between France and Australia. This morning's program begins with a keynote address from a speaker who's truly at the forefront of building a more innovative planet. Ms. Aude Vignelles is Chief Technology Officer at the Australian Space Agency, which commenced its operation in July 2018. Ms. Vignelles is a space and aeronautic engineer by training, and in a role at the agency, she's responsible for writing the civil space strategy technical roadmaps to set a clear path to take the Australian space sector into the next decade and beyond. Ms. Vignelles is tasked with scoping and managing the agency's space program and delivering on domestic and international activities. She has extensive experience in delivering large and complex engineering programs and has an in-depth understanding of the national and international space industry, having started her career at the European Space Agency in the Netherlands. The global space sector is projected to be worth $1 trillion by 2040. Research and education into space technologies and their terrestrial applications has extraordinary potential for economic, social, and environmental impact. At Swinburne, we are committed to building the engine room for innovation in this burgeoning sector by creating sustainable space tech solutions to real-world problems and educating the next wave of space professionals. Space is not just about what happened up there. It's about what we can do with the technology, insights, and solutions we can develop for space to have an impact down here. The Australian Space Agency is at the forefront of this impact, with its goal to triple the size of the Australian space sector and create up to 20,000 jobs by 2030. We are indeed very privileged to have Ms. Vignelles with us today to speak about her experience at the Australian Space Agency and share her insight into this exciting and important sector. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Vignelles.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Great to be here today and talk about the agency updates. I thought that it would be good to give you an update of where we are today and where we are going. And I will try when I can and when I see opportunities for research between France and Australia and do some collaboration, because there is quite a lot of discussion happening between the 2 countries just now. We're talking of a visit of President Macron next year. And as you know, every time someone visits, it focuses our minds in collaboration. So I think it's a good time to have this conversation today. So as Pascale said, we are very focused on creating jobs and growing the industry. So every time we talk about research, we always have that in mind. And when I was exposed to research fields when I grew up in France, there was always this distinction between pure research and applied research. And here, for everything we are doing at this point in time, we are really focusing on applied research. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we discuss between both countries for space matters. So the civil space strategy, it was really good to spend some time to decide what were going to be our area of focus and our pillars. So national, international, responsible, and inspire. That was everything we do are along these 4 pillars. And to these days, we are still following the guidelines and the pillars of the space strategy that was released in April 2019. As you recall as well, so we could have done everything and anything, but we decided to pick the areas where Australia has a role to play in space, either because we need the application of space, And again, for us, we do space to solve problems. At some point, we will look into doing pure scientific missions, and I think we are reaching that corner now. We are looking into doing some pure space science mission. But the first priority is developing space assets and space infrastructure to solve problems on Earth. That's really our main focus. So we came up with these 7 areas of priority. So PNT and Earth observation, as you all know, we need this to function in Australia, especially when you look at the size of the country. Comms as well, and also comms, as you may all know, especially in Swinburne, we are really looking into quantum communication, so quantum encrypted communication. We also have blue sky, maybe not today, but usually blue sky. So optical ground station is something we are very active. We are looking into supporting NASA and ESA in their return on the moon and providing this ground station communication facilities in optical. Space situational awareness. You've remembered one of the pillars was responsible. We want to utilize space in a responsible manner. We want to make sure that we know what we put in space, where all the assets in space, where they are. We want to be able to say with a high level of accuracy where our assets are, and being able to do maneuver to avoid collision. I'm passionate about SSA, so I'm going to try not to talk too much about this, but I invite you to, there is a video on YouTube where you see in 1956, around the Earth, there is nothing in orbit. And then you have a fast track to now, and you can see 1957, the first Sputnik, and then it goes per shape. And you can see that today there is tons of debris around the Earth. Only 4,000 satellites active. The rest are debris, either defense satellites or pieces of debris. And when you look at a flake of paint traveling at 7 kilometers a second in LEO, that can just destroy your satellite. The International Space Station is doing multiple maneuvers per day to avoid debris, and that's getting worse and worse. So that's, to me, the first problem we have to address. Plus, where we are, we're looking at southern sky. So we're looking at objects that other people cannot see. And as you know, to observe everything that is in orbit, it's good to have ground station all across the globe, so you can have a global view of the sky. So we're doing a lot of things on SSA. Across the whole value chain, from sensors to analyzing the data, aggregating the data, and doing some machine learning to calculate the probability of collision and advise on maneuver to do. Access to space, when you look at the size of Australia and where we are again, we have a geography that is focused for launch. So we're looking into what are the opportunities for us there. Remote operation and robotics, that's really based on the expertise that we have in remote operation from the resource sector. I invite you, if you go to Western Australia one day, to visit the mission control of Rio Tinto. When I entered that room 4 years ago, it's a world I didn't know at all. I was impressed. I thought maybe I took the wrong door and I'm in Houston or in a Space Mission Control Center. A very professional room, and you have people here who are remotely operating assets that are 2,000 kilometers away. So they're drilling, they're driving truck, they're driving train, they're doing all this operation from Perth. Looking at people operating drills and all that, I was very impressed with all the tools they were using, and they were using geo-satellite communication. So you have that delay as well, that they have a user interface to cater for that delay. And the lady I was observing looked at me at some point and said, I'm drilling in Perth, I could be drilling on the moon or on Mars, it makes no difference to me. And that's where you think, okay, there is something we can export there. And the other interesting fact is when you look at, Mars Perseverance or other asset on interplanetary body, you often have a team of 120 remotely operating one asset. In the mining industry, it's the contrary. You have one person monitoring and remotely operating 20, 50 assets. So that ratio is very interesting as well. And if you look at going back on the moon and beyond, we're going to need robots to build a lot of things beforehand. So great opportunity there and a lot of activity happening in there. And then we have this R&D bucket, because there is a lot of things we don't know yet, that we have niche skills and knowledge that we can probably spin out into space. And the first domain we discovered was space medicine and life science. So because of all the cancer treatment we have in Australia, we have developed an expertise in radiation technology. And we also, you may have heard that, but the Center of Excellence on Plant in Space that has been founded a couple of weeks ago, lots of research has been done there. So we've decided to do another domain called ASMLS, so Applied Space Medicine and Life Science. And again, other space agencies are quite interested in everything we're doing in that domain, plus everything we do in the Antarctic division, how we are supporting people who are cut off from civilization for 9 months in winter. There is a lot of, again, tools and expertise that we can export in space. So these are our 7 areas of priority. They are still our 7 areas of priorities. And we have developed roadmap for each of this domain. A couple of words on okay, before that. So that's the 3 roadmaps we've published so far. Comms was the first one, published 2 years ago, and almost 3 years ago now. We are highlighting in growth opportunities in the roadmap. In the comms roadmap, what's interesting is we haven't per se invested money, us, the space agency, in that roadmap, but looking at today, we could measure up to 250 million invested in technology that we've highlighted in that roadmap, from private investors, from other space agency, from defense. So there is something that that works well in this roadmap. Earth observation is the second one, and remote operation robotics, the third one. All the 4 remaining one are to be released very, very soon, and final stage of signing off. I'm often asked why it's taking you so long to release the roadmap, and the reason to this is very simple. It's the first time Australia has ever done that. And we're following a very thorough methodology to do these roadmaps. The first activity we do is what is the state of the art in Earth observation, for example, in Australia? Who is working on Earth observation? What are the startups working on this? What are the research being done? Do we have SMEs? Do we have industry? And so we did an audit for each of the 7 areas of priority of what's happening in that domain in Australia. And that took a longer time than expected, because again, that was the first time we were doing this. So we built a database of competencies that we're about to publish along with Austrade and the Space Industry Association of Australia. So very soon, there's going to be a database available for everyone in Australia for free, and you're going to be able to see all this this knowledge and capability that we already have in Australia. So that was the first step. Second step we do is, what is the market? What is the opportunity in that technology? We're not going to say to people, invest in this if we see that it's not sustainable or economically viable. So we do a market study, and often we ask an external party to do a market study. What's the market for this technology for Australia and for the world? Because we want to export technology wherever possible. So again, that takes time. So we see the areas of opportunities that we have. Where do we want to be in 10 years' time? And what are the pathways to go from here to there? So you can see in the roadmap, there is a fold-out page in the middle where you have today, 10 years' time, and for each focus segment that we've identified, how to get there. And these boxes are small projects that people can actually implement in universities, in SMEs, in defense. And again, in the comms roadmap, I could tick quite a few boxes. Interesting to know that we've also identified common critical technology and services that applies for all the roadmap. And if you heard about the National Reconstruction Funds that the new government has announced, if you take this table and put it on the side, it's exactly that. They have identified critical technologies that we can support the development of through the 7 roadmap. And on the bottom, the foundation are all the regulation, workforce development. Workforce development is a big thing, and university have a strong role there, because we want to create the 20,000 jobs. I think that's going to be the easy part. Finding the people who can fill that job is going to be the hard one. I'm going to go quickly through the next slides. This is just explaining the focus segment. I'm going to just pause on Earth observation because there is probably things that we can work together, France and Australia, especially around calibration and validation of the data we receive from the satellites. I know CSIRO is already working with some French organization. You may have heard about Isabelle Frater. She's a CNES personnel who is working within CSIRO, and she's helping us finding some connectivity between French researcher and Australian researcher to do this calibration of data. And again, on Earth observation, we've been engaging with the research community very strongly because we want to understand what is the next thing that they need to be able to solve climate change issues. So if we do our Earth observation, when we do our Earth observation mission, we want to make sure that we develop the instrument that will provide you the data to do the research you need to do. So Earth observation was really interesting in that field. And I may mention on space situational awareness. So this is a sneak preview. We haven't published this yet. There is a lot of research that needs to be done here to understand the environment in which satellites are evolving. So space weather is crucial because, as you know, there is a lot of impact of space weather on how satellites are going to progress in their orbit. So more mission to be done to understand and have more information about space weather so we can predict where satellites are going to go and we can predict which maneuver you can do to avoid collision. I will quickly go through 2 seconds on this. You remember that in September 2019, it's so great to see the NASA logo close to the Australian Space Agency logo. And that was like less than a year we were created. So that happened fast. So we got this 150 million to do the Moon to Mars program. So there is three main sections of that program: the supply chain, the demonstration mission. We want to show that we can launch things in space and be operational in space. And then the Trailblazer, the rover on the moon. This is going to be our flagship program, and we are very excited that still targeting 2026 for that rover. And again, when you're thinking about rover on the moon, we're starting talking about science and exploration, which is very interesting. I won't talk about all the ISI and CIF. So these are all the projects we launched 4 years ago. They are all wrapped up. You can find a lot of details on our website. Combination of low TRL, low technical readiness level to application. We really wanted to test where we are in capabilities in Australia. All these projects have been very successful. Same thing with the supply chain. When you hear that a company like Ray Tracer have signed a contract with Optus, Advanced Navigation, I signed a contract with Intuitive Machine, who is going to send rovers on the moon. Abyss Solution was raised, actually accelerated their value 8 times in 2 years. All these companies have received a grant from the agency. Small grants, but having the Australian Space Agency brand, because our processes are highly competitive, help them promoting their work. So very, very rewarding results. This is quick map of Australia. This is also something we started funding 4 years ago. So this is the Space Infrastructure Fund. It shows to you that we are developing facilities all across Australia to support space activities. Again, lots of details available on our website. Maybe highlight the latest one is the National Space Qualification Network that I knew as one. We're going to concentrate on radiation facility there, and so lots of research in how to protect electronic components from radiation in space. And I would just quickly go through so that's a bit of detail of the Earth observation program, which, by the way, has a strong stream of work to develop research. So we can maybe talk about that a bit more during the panel. And this is the last thing that we are working on, looking at the Artemis launch a week ago, looking at the Moon to Mars objective from NASA and ESA and other space agency and the 21 countries who signed the Artemis Accord. We've looked into the objective of NASA, so habitation, transportation, science and operation, and we've tried to look into our roadmap and see how they can be repackaged to map this objective. And you can see that we have already a lot of projects that are delivering capability across these 4 objectives, some low TRL, but I wanted to show in there that some TRL are 9. 9 means you're operating already, so we are ready for business. We presented that at ISC in September, and the interest we attracted was enormous. So we're going to continue working on this and publish this and continue populating each boxes and do some events in Avalon and so forth. I could talk another hour, but I think the time is up, so I'll stop there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aude. What a fantastic progress. I mean, it was 1961 as Gagarin first did a little bit of a spin, and it's not that long afterwards that we're looking at the possibility of establishing a continuous sort of life on another planet. It is so exciting. Thank you for sharing both the accomplishment of what's happened, but also the kind of a lot of work, but such exciting work ahead of us all. And space is big. So there's room for everyone, and we need to collaborate because nobody is actually going to kind of do all of the work by themselves. There is a few minutes for questions, and Aude has very graciously accepted to take a few questions before participating in the panel. So online or in the flesh. Well done, Alan.
Thank you so much for the chance to ask a question. I'll ask some more in the panel to follow, but Aude, that last slide in particular, where you showed all of the opportunities for Australian research and industry to be involved in the lunar concepts. Sorry, one before. Yeah. In fact, upstairs from this room, we have a solar simulator where we actually can test how you can extract metals from the regolith of the moon from by high temperature heating. And in particular, a lot of that work has come through our industry partnerships with US companies as part of their CLIPS program. So very forward-leaning, investing in industry to drive the R&D that's needed 10 years hence, 15 years hence. I was just wanting to know how the agency, the Australian Space Agency, viewed those kinds of CLIPS programs, and whether that those kinds of commercial partnerships, but still very relatively low TRL, would play out in the coming years, if the agency would be, excited by those kinds of concepts to drive further collaboration between the unis and these early stage companies.
An excellent question, and I'll start by saying that we are very lucky at the Australian Space Agency because there is the old space and new space, right? So now we are setting objectives, and that's the role of agency, to set objectives. And then we count and rely on researcher and industry to solve the problems to reach these objectives. In the grants that we've done so far, we always encourage partnership between industry and research. And so far, all the grants that we have allocated, their collaboration is a big thing. By looking at these Moon to Mars objectives, that's going to be the next way. And we're going to work very closely with partners in universities, the ARC organization, SmartSat CRC, CSRO, because we want to tackle this low TRL. Again, you remember we want to create jobs. So the agency really looks TRL from 4.6 till 9. Everything below that, we need someone to fill that gap. And that's the conversation we're going to start to have this year. How do we work with universities, SmartSat CRC, CSRO, ARC, to fill that gap, the low TRL, and try to have working together, taking something from TRL 1 up to 9, and everybody has a role to play in that steps. So the other thing you mentioned about CLEPS, when you look at the intuitive machine, astrobotics and all that, they are now appointing chief scientists within this company, which to me is giving a very strong sign that they know what they need to build a lunar economy, and they need scientists to help them going there. So it's really starting. It's a new collaboration. It's a new way of working, and I find it very exciting. And often the chief scientists of these companies are very renowned scientists from NASA or ESA, and so I think it's going to be very powerful, and we're going to accelerate a lot of things.
Thank you, Peter Revel from University of Melbourne and Vidral. And I'm an infectious diseases person, so this is perhaps a naive question, but if we were to find, for example, a huge lithium deposit in the moon, for example, and with all the need for rare metals these days as we electrify the world, who owns that? How do we decide? Does Australia own it? Does Russia own it? Does the US? How do we work out that going forward?
Now, you have probably asked the most complicated question so far. That's the thing we have to solve. There is a COPOS UN that is dealing with all the international space law, and it's very similar to what's happening with the ocean and the maritime space that we have here. It's not resolved. They are today, I think the law, and I'm not an expert in that, but whatever is found on the moon or the blood bodies belongs to everyone. So you can't say I was here first, so that's my bit. It doesn't work like this. Having said all this, we're going to have to solve all this problem. And if you ask me, I think we have the tech to go there. The next problem is how we're going to support human life there, also mentally speaking, but radiation and nutrition, all that. But the biggest problem is how we're going to be working all together. And we had a meeting at IEC of all the countries who signed the Artemis Accord. And another complication is even if all these countries, government agencies agree on what to do, most of the companies that are going to go there are commercial companies. So we're going to have a contract, whoever is going to build the rover for us, we're going to have a contract. How do I pass forward the responsibility that I have to this commercial company? Do I have to build some clause in the contract and so forth? These are all the questions we're asking ourselves today. But even something as simple as having two rovers on the moon about to collide, who moves, who does what? Very, very, very good question. So space lawyer is a great career to embark upon, because they are already very busy, and we are lacking this kind of skills. Sorry, I haven't answered your question, but it is a very, very good question.